used commonly by both Union and Confederate troops. Confederates used captured Union saddles, of course, but they also made copies of this saddle in their own arsenals. But if you're in the Union mounted service, whether that be cavalry or mounted infantry, this is the saddle you'll probably ride. It's one of his designs.
Very lightweight.
Very light. You're welcome to pick it up.
One of the lightweight things. Oh yeah.
Now what adds the weight is when you start to put the saddlebags on it that are loaded down with cartridges and your food, curry comb, brush. You add a nose bag to it, your bedroll, and then it gets to be pretty weighty. But the design itself is supposed to be designed light.
Yeah. I imagine it does.
It's a wooden tree covered with rawhide. So you have multiple pieces of wood, and you put those together, then you put the rawhide over it, and rawhide, when it dries, shrinks. So it makes a very strong saddle. How you doing?
But they're protesting it because, because I mean, you got to keep your ears. The ladies, there are some. I have a hoodie. Your child's got a hoodie. We're not going to rob anybody. I don't, or kill anybody. They try to punish all the innocent folks, you know, because of a few bad apples. You're not feeling good. Good morning, sir. Things you would have found a 19th century doctor to have had in his possession. One of the things that people are amazed about this kind of this time period in medicine is that doctors didn't really know why you became ill. Now, obviously, if you were wounded, they understood that. They didn't know about bacteria. They did not know about microbes of any form or fashion. And so consequently, they did not understand sanitization, sterilization, or even really see the purpose of cleanliness. It was very common for a Civil War era surgeon to be working on wounded soldiers and never stop between patients to wash his hands or his instruments. At the very best you could hope for is that he would wipe his hands on his vest or his apron that he was wearing and go from patient to patient to patient. Of course, we understand the downside of that is that that first patient has a communicable disease or infection of some type. All of the rest of the men in the line now have that same problem. The instruments that surgeons would have used in the 19th century are not sterilizable based on the type of construction. They all have handles that are made out of some sort of organic material. Principally ebony wood, bone, or ivory, or tortoiseshell. There are some instruments like this small folding scalpel. This is actually made from hard rubber, the handle here is. Now the blades themselves, of course, would have been sterilizable, but the surgeons saw no point in doing that. The one thing that a surgeon did that did rely upon sterilization, they were unaware that they had sterilized it. This is horsehair, and this would have been the preferred suture material for a Southern surgeon. The reason it was preferred was because patients who were stitched with this material tended to heal faster, with less infection, and with fewer problems. Now, in order for the surgeon to use this horsehair as suture material, it had to be boiled. Not to clean it, as we think might be necessary, or to sterilize it. It had to be boiled in order that they might tie a knot in this hair. Without boiling, the knot would simply relax and fall out, and making it useless as a suture. But once you boil it, it'll take a nice tight knot. We know that it also sterilizes it. That's why the soldiers did better, and that's why this became the Southern doctor's preferred suturing material. They had other options as far as sutures go. They did have silk, they did have cotton sutures, but this was their favorite. One of the things that persisted in medicine up to the time of the Civil War, and continuing probably for about 20 years after the war, was the practice of bloodletting. The bloodletting had been around for about 2,000 years at this point, and it continued in small pockets up until about the 1880s. In the 19th century, it didn't matter why you called for a doctor, what your illness was. The first thing that he would have done to you most likely would have been to bleed you. This is called a fleam, and this is one of the instruments that the doctor would have used to bleed the patient. All three of these blades here are still razor sharp even after all this time. We have a smaller version. It is a mechanical fleam. And this one is actually spring-loaded. It has a small iron spring inside, and so the force of the blow that you get with this is the same each and every time. There were different sizes of this one available. I think this is one of the smallest ones. This is very similar to what would have been used at the very beginning of the 19th century, end of the 18th, to bleed President George Washington. Washington actually died from the doctor's care because he had been bled by 3 different physicians over I believe it was a 2-day time span, in which they had removed 4.5 pints of his blood, roughly. Washington died from blood loss about a day later. Now, we also have bleeding cups, glass versions, as well as metal versions that had been made for the United States military. In the use of bleeding cups, it was the doctor's goal to remove blood from the patient as efficiently and as quickly as possible. These cups were heated over the flame of the candle or a lamp, and then placed on an incision on the patient's body from whichever site the doctor had selected. And as this warm cup cools, suction is created, vacuum is created on the inside of this cup, actually making the patient bleed more profusely from that wound than they would have otherwise bled. Once the cup filled up roughly about halfway with blood, the doctor would have removed it, emptied it, warmed it again, and placed it back on the cut. It was very common for doctors to take a pint of blood from any patient for whatever the illness was. In the case of Civil War surgeons particular, if you had been a soldier, this is the last thing you would have wanted to see in the hands of your surgeon. This is called a capital saw or a bone saw, and just like its name suggests, it was used for the purpose of cutting through bones in arms and legs. Your first question might be, well, why would my doctor want to cut off my arm and my leg? The kind of ammunition used during the Civil War made that necessary. This is a fired 57, actually 58 caliber bullet fired from a Confederate rifle that has struck something. And we see how flat and spread out this bullet has. It looks like a mushroom top now. This is what made warfare so deadly. This type of ammunition, if it were to strike your arm or your leg on top of a bone, chances are very high that the bone underneath this bullet would have been shattered. And it's that shattering of bone that medicine was not equipped to deal with, leaving amputation their only option. Early in the war, surgeons had attempted to save a limb damaged thusly by removing the bone fragments and the pieces of the shattered bone. And all that did was to leave a useless limb. The soldier still had his arm, or still had his leg, but was unable to move it. And so surgery, using amputation, became really the only viable option. Now, most men that suffered amputations did survive their wounds. As barbarous and cruel as this sounds, they did survive. The chances of survival in arm amputation was much greater than a lower limb. And lower limbs could be survived as well, having lost that. But the mortality rate increased as the amputation went up the leg. It was almost unheard of to have an amputation at the hip level and survive that. But it was possible to survive. Now, one thing that makes the concept of amputation during the Civil War a little more palatable is the fact that they did have anesthetic that was available for use. And to my knowledge, 99.9% at least of all operations done during the American Civil War were done under the effect of anesthesia. And so the things that we have seen in Hollywood movies and television shows where a soldier is given a stick or a belt to bite on, or he has liquor poured down his throat, is largely mythology. Chloroform had been around for about 20 years by the time the Civil War came around. Ether for a couple of years less, so about 18 years. Both were readily available. Chloroform was the preferred anesthesia for the Southern surgeon because it was less flammable than ether was. And if you think, well, why was that important, that the flammability of these? Consider the source of light that they would have used in their field hospitals, in their operating areas. Open flame lights would have predominated unless you were using natural daylight. And the last thing you want is for ether fumes to be building up in your operating room to where you're going to blow up your staff as well as the patient whose life you're trying to save. The way that chloroform was typically applied to a patient was typically using a natural piece of sponge or a handkerchief that would be placed over the patient's face. The chloroform would be dripped from a smaller container onto the sponge or the napkin, and then as the patient breathes, he inhales fumes from this anesthetic and drifts off into unconsciousness. The problem with this, there's two problems actually. This is hard to come by. Nowhere in the South was this manufactured. And so everything that was obtained was either sold under the table to Southern buyers by Northern pharmaceutical companies, was captured from enemy supplies, or smuggled in through the lines by ladies with this carried under their dresses. And so this was a very valuable commodity. You didn't want to waste it. You wanted to be a very good steward of this supply that you had. But when using the napkin or the sponge, there was a certain amount that was lost to open air evaporation. You know, your patient's only going to inhale so much, and he's going to drift off into unconsciousness. The rest of it tends to evaporate into the air around the operating table. And if you're doing just one operation, that's not a problem. If you're doing 300 or 400 operations, it tends to become a problem because it's easy to see where your surgeons may actually become somewhat inebriated from inhaling fumes of the anesthesia over a long period of time. This is called a Chisholm inhaler. This was manufactured by a man named Julian Chisholm, who was a Southern surgeon, who had experienced this open air evaporation of anesthesia and constructed this inhaler to be used to alleviate that. The idea being that there would be cotton or wool placed on the inside, and the anesthesia would be dripped through this hole with these tubes held to the patient's nostrils. This allows the patient, as he breathes normally, to inhale the fumes that are going to put him to sleep for his operation, but it limits the open air evaporation that takes place. So not only does your surgeon have a better chance to not become inebriated, it also lets us use this precious commodity more efficiently, and where we may have been able to treat, say, 100 men initially by using the sponge over the mouth method. Now, with this, we've been able to treat additional men, perhaps even 150 men, from that same can of anesthetic. So this was a very valuable creation. Another invention during the war involved the location of bullets inside of a wound. Normally, a physician would have used a bullet probe of some sort. They were all created from a very soft metal, usually silver, and so you can see that this one has been well used. It's quite crooked. This one is actually graduated, so once the surgeon has found the bullet in the wound, he can see exactly how far down he's got to go to retrieve it. The problem with using this kind of a probe is that you're relying upon this tapping upon something hard. You can't actually feel it with your fingers. And so you don't know inside of this wound whether I have found the bullet or a piece of bone. Now, where the invention comes in, there was a Frenchman by the name of Nelleton that decided that this white porcelain tip on his probe was a good idea, and he was right. Because in this dark wound that I cannot see inside of, I find something hard. With bullets being made from lead, the surgeon would spin this probe, and if he has indeed found the bullet, he retrieves the probe, washes the blood from it, and there will be a black or a gray ring on this white porcelain. If he sees that ring, he knows for certain that was the bullet that I had heard when I hit something hard and not a piece of bone. And so it made retrieval more rapid and more certain. In the South, particularly, many of the medications of the day were not available. Medications that would have been cutting edge, what would have been considered, the cutting edge medications. And they were not available because of the Union Navy's blockade of southern ports. One of the things that was hard to come by was quinine. Then as now, quinine is used to treat malaria. Quinine is created from the bark of a tree that grows in Peru. So the Southern armies were forced to find indigenous plants that they thought could be used to replace those medicines that they were unable to get. And this being one of the ones they were unable to get, they began searching for a replacement. The closest they were able to come was to use the bark of a dogwood tree. It was not as effective as quinine was. It did provide some relief for the fever and for the chills that malaria patients were suffering. Now, fairly early in the war, there was a Southern surgeon by the name of Francis Porcher. And Porcher realized the effect that the Union blockade was going to have on the medical effort. And he set about compiling information that would identify which type of plants could be used, what disease they could treat, what part of the plant was used because the part differs from plant to plant. Sometimes it's bark and stem, sometimes it's root, sometimes it's leaves, flowers, and seed. His work took about 3 years of time and 700 pages. But when he was done, he had a work that was printed by the Confederate government, was distributed to the Southern armies. Now, I don't know with what effectiveness the armies individually used that work, but I know that the work was available for them to use. But it would identify to them, if you're treating this disease, this is the plant you want to find. This is the part of the plant you want to find. This is when you harvest it. This is how you dry it, how you prepare it. This is the dosage that you give. And so he had it all mapped out for them. So very forward-thinking man, I think. So in the South, herbal medicine became very important, both for the military doctors as well as for civilian doctors like myself, who had been left behind to care for the civilian populations in the small towns. One of the things that falls under the heading of herbal medicine, this is the root of a poke plant. Poke salad, as people here know it. This was used in the 19th century to create ointments or salves that were used to treat skin cancers in people. And it would have looked much like a salve today you would expect it to look. It would be very, very greasy mixture. But this was used for skin cancers. And I'm asked many times by people about the effectiveness of herbal medicine. Most think that it's mumbo jumbo, you know, that it doesn't really work. But I'll tell you this, in 21st century America, modern medicine is isolating a drug from this same root to fight leukemia in children. And so I'm fairly well assured of the effectiveness of this. Yeah, not the same case in all plants, but in this one case in particular, that people of the 19th century and before knew something about how this worked and used it to their advantage. Another thing that comes into herbal medicine, this one I think is kind of interesting. There was no aspirin, there was no Tylenol, ibuprofen, the kind of common painkillers that people now are used to using. This is, in essence, 19th century aspirin. These are twigs taken from a white willow tree. And white willow has naturally occurring in its bark salicylic acid, which is the active ingredient in our aspirin today. And so this, along with a lot of other medications, would have been given by the doctor in the form of tea. A patient would take their bundle of sticks and they would place it in their cup and pour hot water over this and let it steep for a few moments, sweeten this to taste, and in that short time frame a certain amount of the salicylic acid is going to leach from the bark and into your tea, and then you're ready to go. Now, on the downside, doctors would frequently say your headache will be gone in 2 or 3 days. And as for me and myself, I like my headaches to leave a little sooner. But this was 19th century aspirin. The most commonly prescribed pill during the time was this little blue guy here. This is called a blue mass pill. And blue mass was given for practically everything. It was given for depression, it was given for headaches, it was given for sore throats, for other various aches and pains, ear infections, sore throats. It would have been useful. It was effective in some things, and the thing that made it effective also makes it toxic to us. This contains mercuric chloride. And as we know now, mercury is highly toxic to us. They did not know that then, the bulk of the doctors. One of the side effects of this was extreme mood swings. And this was something experienced by Abraham Lincoln before he was elected president. He was involved My understanding is in one of the presidential debates with someone other than Stephen Douglas, and he was taking this particular drug for depression. And somehow during the course of that debate, his opponent said something that angered Lincoln. It caused Lincoln to grab the man by his collar, lift him from the floor, and begin to shake him. And Lincoln apparently knew himself well enough. He knew that this is not my normal behavior. You know, what's responsible for this? And he was able to pin the blame on this and ceased taking this medication. But it was known to cause mood swings. This other pill represented here would be opium. Now, opium is made from the sap, from the gum of the poppy plant, the poppy flower. During the Civil War, with medicines being as hard to come by as they were, Southern ladies were encouraged to grow poppies in their flower garden to help the war effort. This was the painkiller of the day. Now, if you had been a wounded soldier who was destined to have an arm or a leg amputated, the operation would have been carried out under anesthesia, but once you were out of the operating room and into the mode of recovery, you would be given opium or sometimes morphine. They both come from the same source to help manage your pain. During the Civil War, there are several things, medically speaking, that were used or developed for the first time. Injectable drugs is one of those things. It was discovered during the course of the war that morphine could be injected at the site of the wound and give much more rapid relief of the pain than giving it orally, which had been the way that it had been done up until that point. Other things that came out of the Civil War, the whole concept of using ambulances was a new thing. Nursing as a profession was a new thing that came out of the Civil War. Triage, when we are ascertaining as to how critically is this person hurt and do they need to be seen first or can they wait? You know, that's something that came out of the Civil War. Many of the children and young people that I talk to, I tell them to, you know, next time they see their doctor, thank their doctor for going to school and for doing good in their studies, and appreciate the doctors that they have now, because you know, you'll hear people talk about the good old days. 19th century was not the good old days as far as medicine is concerned. There were 700,000 men, roughly, that died during the course of the Civil War. That's both sides added together. But only roughly about 100,000 of those died from actually combat-related injuries. The other 600,000 died from disease. The largest disease the largest culprit in the area of disease they died from was dysentery. And they died from diseases that we would associate as being childhood diseases, from measles and mumps and chickenpox, and things that I had as a child in the 20th century. And so medicine was definitely not as good then as it is now. So for sure, be grateful that you live when you live now. Over here on the extreme end, we have our dressing tray. Now this is something that you would have found, you know, every company of men would have been required to have a dressing tray in their hospital area. And the dressing tray would have had a set inventory of various sizes of roller bandages. It would have had lint or Sharpie and patent lint that would have been produced by the ladies back home. And this was one of the ways, in addition to growing poppies in your garden, that the ladies would have aided the war effort. There was such a thing known as a bandage rolling party or a lint scraping party that was part social function, where the young ladies would get together. All the young men were gone to war, but the young ladies would get together and they would have tea or whatnot and socialize, and in the process they would rip up all of mom's tablecloths, curtains, petticoats, linens of various sorts, and they would roll bandages, and they would take the linen tablecloths and cut them into 6-inch squares and then separate it thread by thread until they had this mass here. And this is what was used, is what modern doctors would use, gauze or something to act as an absorbent underneath the roller bandage. So this would have been placed against the wound, with the roller bandage being placed on top to hold it in place. So it was merely an absorbent. This patent lint here was also created by the girls at home, but it was actually scraped with a sharp knife from a piece of fabric, basically just fraying all of the threads. The fabric was usually attached to a board or something, but just scraping this over and over and over again, you create this pile of fuzz, and that fuzz would be pressed into sheets and then wrapped up and sent to your boys that were in the field. And this was one of the ways that the ladies at home, supported their men, because they were responsible to a large part in continuing to supply the needs that the soldiers in the field had. The particular town that I am from, its young men during the war, one of the regiments raised was sent to Virginia to fight, even though they were from Tennessee. And the ladies at home would have sent these kinds of supplies to their regiment with the Army of Northern Virginia. Any questions about anything particular here? I don't know if we talked about bleeding or not, because I talk about it so much I forget what I've told one group and what I've not told another. But during the 19th century and before, doctors subscribed to a school of thought called the four humor theory. And they believed if you were sick, well, first off, they believed that you had these four humors, or four liquids in your body. And they were called blood, bile, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm. If you were sick, one of those was out of whack. The proportion was off. And so everything a doctor did to you, whether it was bleeding or whether it was giving you medications of various sorts, it was an attempt on that doctor's part to restore the balance of those four humors. Now, they could give you medications that would cause you to become nauseous. They would give you medications to cause you to have diarrhea. And they would give you medications to cause you to sweat profusely. Okay, those were attempts at restoring three of those humors. Blood, I think, my personal opinion, was easier for them to work with. And you see much more written in the literature of the day about bloodletting. And I think to some extent it was self-gratifying for the surgeon, because he could take this patient, he could remove a pint and a half of blood, and in his mind he thought, I have done this much good because I have taken out this much blood, and so the patient is sure to recover from whatever their ailment is. They would bleed you for just about anything, just like they gave blue mass for just about any kind of ailment. If you had called for the doctor, you were bled, and it was very common practice. The idea had been around for about 2,000 years, so this was old thinking. It was solidly entrenched in the way that doctors thought. This is a fleam. This is one of the tools that would have been used. This one bullet here that has actually hit something, has mushroomed. This is what it looked like before it was fired. Those are the same caliber, same type bullet, just one was dropped and one was not.
Yeah, what we've got set up here today is an example of civilian field photographers under contract with the military. And we know one of those photographers actually was here taking images in the aftermath of the Battle of Johnsonville, Mr. Jacob Coonley, who was receiving probably around $5 to $6 a day from the military to make glass negatives of anything military for the federal government. And so the process he's using is the wet plate collodion process, in which along with the camera, you have to bring everything with you into the field to make that work. And so if I want to make an image, I've got to prepare a plate one at a time, take it to the camera, expose it, then rush it back to the dark room to develop it and fix it before all the chemistry dries out, or otherwise we'll lose the image. And so on a good day, a good light, we could probably make an image once every 10 to 15 minutes. And so rather a laborious process, but if we're on our game and read the light right and all the chemistry's working, we can hope to have success every image. If not, then we start all over again. But if we walk over, the first thing we're going to do for to make our picture is to set up the camera and decide on what our shot's going to be, get it all focused in, instead of making a plate and then running over here to try to set up the shot. This process is only going to work while it's wet, and so I want to make sure I give myself a lot of time when I prepare the plate to allow it to work and capture the image. So once we've set the camera up, get it focused in, we'll walk over to the dark room, and this is where all the nuts and bolts of the operation is needed. We've got to bring all this into the field with us. And so inside the dark room, I will select a plate to make our image upon, and first thing we've got to do is take clean off our plate, and then we're going to coat it with a substance called collodion. And our collodion is made from cotton that's been dissolved in nitric acid, which made gun cotton, as they called it in the day, but we know it as nitrocellulose. That is then diluted further by alcohol and ether, and then to make it work for photography, then I've got to put a couple of more chemicals into it. We refer to it as salting the collodion. And in this case, I've got a bromide and an iodide in this mix. And that's going to be key to make it work, because once the collodion is poured all over the plate and it begins to gel, I will take it back into the dark room and put it into a solution of silver nitrate. And it's the silver binding with those two salts that I put in that will make it light sensitive and will be able to capture the image. So once we poured the collodion, we're ready to, we put it in the silver nitrate. When it's time to pull it out, then I have to be totally dark. So that's why we have the big curtain that will wrap around me inside the dark room. But to bring it from the dark room to the camera, I will load it up into a part of the camera. It's called its plate box that fits in the back, that holds, depending on the size of the plate that I'm shooting, I will select a proper size kit for it. So we've got this one set up for a half plate, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I would, in the dark, place the plate and chemistry side down into the plate box, close it up. Now it's safe to walk out and go to the camera. And when we mount it in the camera, what's going to happen, we take the shade out, and wherever we've got that lens focused on, that in center of the shot is going to be the same center as this plate. And so if everything is lined up well, we're focused well, then we should be able to, whatever we've got focused from that lens is going to be focused there. So walk it over to the camera. Move the focusing glass out of the way on this Anthony Bellows camera, then place the plate box in. Remove the shade, and now the shutter on this camera is actually the lens cap. So I've got to be ready to do three things. First, I'll pull my pocket watch out. Then the next thing, I'm going to look around and judge the light. And right now with this, I know with this particular lens and the amount of light I have right now, it would take about a minute exposure for this image. And so when I'm ready to do so, the shutter is simply lens cap off. Start counting off the time. And when I reach the end of our minute exposure here, put the lens cap back on. And then we're ready to take the plate that we've exposed back to the darkroom. Once again, we'll go inside, and we're going to have to be in dark conditions, but inside the dark box, the darkroom here, I would remove the plate and then I would put it in a solution developer. And if I was right on my mark with my time, I should see the image come up in about 8 seconds. And once that happens, then I'm going to rinse it, and then rinse it again. And then it's ready to be fixed. And so once the developing's done and I've got the fixing, I'm going to bring it back out to the light, and we're going to allow it to dry in the air. And once that's occurred and it's well dried, then we'll coat it with a varnish, and then the plate hopefully will last indefinitely. And an example of one of the plate images we made with that camera, this is what we're hoping to come up with. Okay, which way? Everything I've told you typically would be over a period of about 10 to 15 minutes.
And my mama back to
The reason it's upside down now, okay. So your eye does the same thing. It sends the image to the back of your retina in reverse and upside down. Your brain flips it.
Was your nightly experience last night good?
Well, I went home. but yes, but we love very chilly here. Great. So we have very close because it's the light and sleep. And that was one of the most important parts of that. So we're trying to oh, good girl. No, I actually grew up out in Arizona, and my husband and I retired out here from Nashville. It's pretty warm. So, yeah. Good luck. Thank you. And I got the beans. I ground up the coffee and put it in little packets and boil it in a teapot.
We're not period for your channel TV, your Comcast TV.
All right, I want to welcome you to camp of the 13th United States Colored Troops. We represent the troops that were actually stationed here at New Johnsonville, and our interpretation here is of a recruiting post, because this was a real necessity at this particular time to get African Americans who were newly freed or ex-slaves to be participants in their own freedom. And in order to do that, they had to be induced and sometimes persuaded to join the Union Army. This post is one of those things that attempted to do that. We've reproduced here, in fact, some of the posters that were used at that particular time as part of that inducement. They appeal to honor, valor, and certainly protection, because if you were freed or abandoned slave at that particular ex-slave at that particular time, protection was very important to you, as well as was a means of income, because you were pretty much at everybody else's risk. We try to show here the examples of black accomplishment, the chances to improve yourself in your life, and pointing out that the military at that point in time, and particularly here in New Johnsonville, was that opportunity. So take a look around and see what you see here. If there are any questions, you just go ahead and ask. How about Nissan, all right? Some of the armament that was used. And what's represented here are both the Springfield and Enfield rifle muskets, which were used by both sides. The Springfields were made in the United States, here in Springfield, Massachusetts, and the Enfields were brought in from the British. And of course the British during the Civil War supplied both sides with armament, but they were quite interested in the outcome of this war. Let me show you some other things.
Okay.
This particular poster appeals to men of color, asking them to arms, and you notice the Victorian flavor of these things. People of that period in time were very concerned about honor, their own reputation, and how it would look to future generations. And as you can see now, if you were less, our freemen, less brave than slaves, was an appeal that was very hard to step away from if you were a slave trying to find your place in the world. And finally, to draw your attention to the poster here in the back of our centerpiece, it's the Fighting for Freedom poster, which points out the issues of emancipation and the importance of the Emancipation Proclamation and to the freed slaves, because prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, African Americans could not serve in the Union Army. Afterwards, not only were they given the freedom of their own freedom, but also allowed to join the Army. And right here, one of the 186,000 black soldiers was Christian Abraham Fleetwood, who received the Medal of Honor. This particular poster appeals to strength of former slaves, and pointing out that not all former slaves were simply wandering around not knowing what to do or where to do. They had their own individual personalities, they had their own individual interests. And these things vary, particularly from the very young, as you can see here, this lady with her child, over to the absolute defiance. Now here's a woman who was proud and defiant. So whatever happened in this world, she was going to survive. The statement here about the strongest people in the world aren't those most protected. They are ones that must struggle against adversary and obstacles and surmount them to survive. To a former slave, it gives them courage.
Someone at Franklin decided that he wanted to even up the odds a little bit, so he bought himself a Henry.
Okay.
And that cost him 4 months worth of his wages.
Wow.
So it was very expensive. This is these two weapons, the Spencer and the Henry, both were the only weapons used with cartridges.
This ain't too bad?
No, actually the magazine is in the back.
Okay.
Got one here if you're interested.
Look at that.
This is a cavalry weapon. It's a little heavy for a weapon. That was one of the objections that Uncle Sam had for it. That's empty.
Yeah.
So now you got to add
Enfield?
8. Pardon?
Oh yeah, it's empty.
Yes, it's empty. So you have to add 8 bullets to that, so it raises the weight from about 10 pounds to about 11 pounds.
What is that, about a 45 or
52 caliber.
52?
And actually,
beautiful.
What you did was, to load it, you put your hammer in half cock, and you turn around and you... But
Oh.
you pull the magazine out, and you drop your shells down in it, and then when you put it back in, it encases it down that.
Yeah.
So then you put your
Hold about 6,
rammer
8
back
rounds or
in.
10 or
It holds 7.
7?
And then it holds 1 in the chamber, so it was an 8 shot.
Uh-huh.
This one was produced in 1864, and I don't think it was ever issued.
Okay.
There is some wear on it. The seal right there.
Yeah.
That was from the buckle that attached this to the tether. These weapons were tethered
Cavalry?
to the soldier. Yeah. And so if he dropped the weapon, it just went to his side.
Yeah.
So that has some wear there, and then on this side, part of the stock is busted. But other than that, look at there, it's got the gold paint on top of it.
Uh-huh.
So other than that, it's in excellent condition.
Yeah.
What? Who built that? Springfield or
Spencer.
Spencer?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one
I think
actually
you said that.
was manufactured by Burnside. Burnside was a weapons manufacturer. After General Burnside, he made his own carbines.
Okay.
What happened was Uncle Sam ordered a lot of 30,000 of these in the end of 1864, and Spencer couldn't provide. Their manufacturing was already capped out, and so Spencer went to Burnside and he said, "Would you be willing to make these?" And they gave him, a percentage of those profits.
Oh, okay.
And so it was issued out in 1865, January of 1865. So it would have only seen 4 months of service because the war ended in April of '65. So,
But it would have been at the final 4 months of the final 8 months.
yeah,
Which was so terrible.
but Uncle Sam did issue these all the way up to 1885.
Okay.
And most of them went out to the frontier, Indian wars. But it was considered the best repeater that the Union Army had. And Tennessee has the distinction of having the first battle fought with Spencer. And that's at Hoover's Gap over towards Cincinnati. It's at exit 118, I think, was the exit.
What year is that?
It was June of 1863.
Oh, okay.
Wilder's brigade, Lightning Brigade, was the one that had that, was in that battle. He had the rifles. The rifles are a lot more rare than the carbines. There was about 100,000 of the carbines made. There was about 4,000 of the rifles made.
So what is the Spencer, the Henry rifle?
Henry was not a good weapon. It was hard to clean, and you're dealing with, even though you're dealing with a cartridge weapon, you still were dealing with black powder.
Okay, this wasn't black powder?
This was too. But with this one, to take this apart, take that one screw out, and the whole thing drops out. With the Spencer, with the Henry, you had to take 4 small screws out. And so the likelihood that you losing one of those small screws when you was in the field was pretty high. So, it was very difficult to clean one in the field. Whereas, actually, the Spencers, we didn't clean very often at all because the weapon was in such good shape.
Well, did the South ever get any repeaters,
Yeah, Nathan Bedford Forrest troops had the Spencers.
Okay.
And he got them in battle.
Okay.
The problem was that after he run out of the ammunition, he was out of the gun, so he threw them away. So a lot of these weapons that you find that've been laying in the ground are pretty much worthless now because they
I know.
you can't hardly tell what they are. The wood's all gone and the metal's in bad shape. But in any case, Nathan Bedford Forrest had it, and then Jeff Davis's 25 bodyguards. He had military bodyguards, and they had the Henry. So, like I said, the Henry was, everybody likes to talk about the Henry as being a great weapon for the Army. The Army only bought 1,200 of them. And their problem was that they couldn't supply enough ammunition for them. When you get into a battle, they'd shoot up so much ammunition, they literally could not get ammunition to them fast enough. At the Battle of Chickamauga, the 21st Ohio had the Colt revolving rifle here. They fired off 34,850 rounds in a little less than 5 hours. They run out of ammunition, in fact. And they tried 58 caliber, which is the musket load. That's a 56 caliber. And they found out that it reversed the barrel. But then if they put the bayonet on it, that was enough support that they could fire 58 caliber ammo through it. They also got captured. So the repeater didn't help them that much. But that was the first time that the Confederates had ever come up against repeaters. Really? And with the musket, a typical soldier could load and fire a musket 3 rounds per minute. Well, with Colt, you know, you could fire all 6 rounds off in 30 seconds. So having a repeater had a distinct advantage because your enemy just assumed you had a lot of men up on top of the hill, and that's exactly what they did at Snodgrass Hill. They just thought they had a lot of soldiers up there. Instead, they had a rifle that fired a lot of ammo. They had a Mississippi outfit there that charged that hill twice against the 21st Ohio, and there wasn't enough of them left that they were put in reserve, and they couldn't even, they lost 2/3 of their men. So that's roughly 750 men out of 1,000. If they had 1,000 to start with, at that point in time, they probably would.
So the Confederates didn't have these kind of guns before the war started? You know of
who?
The Confederates. Do you have these?
No. In fact, you know, the Confederates didn't do themselves any good by capturing the armories, because most of the guns that were in the armories were the old flintlock muskets, and they were in there in case you know, the flintlock was quit produced in 1841, and so when they captured those, that's the only weapon they had initially. Well, if it's raining outside, flintlock's worthless. And there was at least one battle fought here in the West, and that was at Mill Springs, Kentucky, where all of the Confederate troops had flintlocks. And they got so frustrated because they wouldn't fire. It was raining the day of the battle. And they got so frustrated that they took and beat the gun around a tree. And marched, and they were defeated pretty badly by the character that I portray, which was George Thomas. And they were beat so bad that they just broke up in small groups and, you know, marched away.
I'm going to choose some of the regular Confederate foot soldiers. They carry revolvers with them.
The foot soldier, not typically, but a lot of them had them because they pick them up after a battle. You know, one of the jobs of the winning side was to police the battlefield. And they had, both sides had gunsmiths that actually would repair weapons, because a lot of them would be damaged from being hit by rounds or whatever. And so with the Southern boys, they had the Enfield, which the Enfield weapon at that time was considered the best weapon in the world. It was produced by England, and the Enfield was parts interchangeable. Now, a lot of people don't realize that most of these weapons were made by gunsmiths, and gunsmiths didn't make it to any pattern. So you take a hammer off of one, it wouldn't work on another weapon, except the Enfield. It was the first weapon in the world that had parts interchangeability. They built the parts to a blueprint. Whereas a gunsmith, he would build a gun and it looked great, except when you broke it, you had to bring it back to him because you couldn't get another part off another gun to fit. So that was a big deal. And so when the fellow that the South hired, a fellow by the name of Hughes, H-U-E-S, he went to England, and England was sympathetic to the South because the South was selling them cotton. But they couldn't be outwardly sympathetic because they would be saying they were for slavery, and they weren't. They had passed laws that said, you know, you couldn't own slaves in any of the English territories. And so the problem was, how do you support the South without letting the world know that you're sympathetic to the South's problems and slavery? And so what they did, Hughes went around with England's permission to all the suppliers that built all the parts that it took to, and he negotiated a deal where he could buy the parts from the suppliers. The English weapon was what they called the Crown Enfield. It would have a crown stamp on it, which meant that it was produced to the crown. And there wasn't any other customers that these suppliers were supposed to sell guns to. but England worked around those issues and secretly sold Enfields to the South. And so it was considered the best, most accurate weapon at the time also. So many of the,
Is that rifle?
pardon?
Is that rifle?
Yes, it's a rifled weapon. By 1841, most everything was rifled. If you had a non-rifled smoothbore that was percussion cap, it had been changed, but it had not been rifled. They even
rifled musket.
Yeah, the up at the Tennessee Museum in downtown Nashville, they have in their Civil War exhibit, they have a rifling tool. And it's pretty cool how it works, you know, because the rifling, most of them is, there's 3 to 6 grooves to a rifling. There's not one groove, you know, it's 3 to 6. And so it's pretty cool how they made that weapon, and you know, and as it enters the barrel, it actually has to make that revolving portion. And so it was really pretty ingenious how they did that. And so they would take the old smoothbore weapons, and then they would convert them over from flintlocks to percussion cap, and then they would also rifle. So they went from the smoothbore would fire a ball, and the rifle version would fire what they called a mini ball. Now everybody thinks that mini ball is a small ball. That's not what it meant. The designer of this conical bullet was a fellow by the name of Claude Monet, who was a Frenchman. And so when he come to America with his conical bullet, we do what we always do with the English language. We kind of really made it the way we wanted it, and we called it Mini. His name was Monet. So in any case, why that made a good weapon out of it. But again, it would take a gunsmith to actually repair that, because it was not parts interchangeable. You go into the field and you pick them up off the ground, and one hammer off of one is not going to fit on another one. So, you know, it kept some of the boys busy repairing those.
Now, was there any Union infantry in Eastern Tennessee in 1861?
Union infantry?
I know there's some clashes over there, but
yes, but they weren't Tennessee troops. What happened? Eastern Tennessee, what they did was there was a lot of Union sympathizers over there. In fact, they were almost all Union. And what they would do is they'd march up into Kentucky. The 9th Kentucky, it was actually almost all Tennessee troops. And they did that because, of course, the South was in possession of East Tennessee because they come down the railroad system. And if it was known that you were a Union sympathizer, then they would harass your family.
Was there a lot of atrocities in Eastern Tennessee?
A lot. I mean, you know, you read, there's a book on Google Archive. Have you ever used that?
No.
It's e-book type stuff, and it's free. And there's a book called The Adventures of Daniel Ellis. And he was a scout from East Tennessee, and he would take groups of men from Clark County over into around Somerset, Kentucky, a little bit further north, all the way up to Lexington. He would take them so they could join up on with the other Tennessee boys that were already there. Okay. So, and the atrocities that he talks about in there is unbelievable. And whoever was in power, they're the ones that were doing the atrocities. So you can't say that the Confederates were most atrocious against the Union people, because when the Union got in power, they just turned around and did the same thing to them. So it was, you know, you do that to me, your time's coming. But what they would do is, it was unbelievable to me. You'd think that wife and kids would be sacred, but they would go in and take the wife and kids and take all of their clothes. Even a lot of times they'd take the clothes that was on their backs, and then they would burn their house down, take all their cattle and all their foodstuffs. And I mean, it was just unheard of what they would do.
Was any rapes reported or anything like that?
There was a few, but not a great number of them. But you know, the personal embarrassment would be enough. You know, a lot of them went to their fellow Union friends, and they were hidden. You know, a lot of the people kept their mouth shut about whether they were pro-Union or pro-Southern. You know, they just were obliging when the Southern boys come around, the Confederates. And, you know, a lot of them were their neighbors, because they were split evenly with, you know, if he was sympathetic to the South or the North. You know, your next door neighbors would be sympathetic to the South.
Now, was there any small skirmishes in 1865 in Tennessee still? You know, most of it probably, you know, ended when,
especially over in Eastern Tennessee.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure about that. I know it's been
it was more guerrilla activity.
I know there's been talk of some skirmishes around Nolensville, like early 1865 and stuff like that. I was wondering if that was true or not.
Yes. Yeah, and like I said, they usually called them irregulars. They weren't regular troops, and a lot of cavalry. Now they were all on a line south of Nashville, around Columbia, into the northern Alabama. But they just do whatever they could to interrupt train service and all that kind of stuff.
Because I was curious, because I know Hood basically moved all his troops out by late December into Alabama and stuff. But I was wondering.
He didn't move them out. They got chased out.
They got chased out. And I was wondering if there's still some activity going on in the early months of August.
Well, see, Hood marched into Tennessee with 41,000 troops. Most of them were Tennesseans. It was the Army of Tennessee. And when he attacked at Franklin, he lost 6,000 troops. When he made it to, on December 1st, he made it to Nashville. And he had about 28,000 left at that point. And he wanted Thomas to attack him. And Thomas obliged him on the 15th of December. And when he did that, Thomas actually started out on attacking on Hood's right flank with USCT troops. But that was a diversion. Actually, what Thomas was after was to hit the enemy on the left flank. And so what happened was he had infantry attack head on. And then he had his cavalry, which is actually mounted infantry, swing around in behind Hood's troops. Well, when a soldier he's fighting on the front, and then all of a sudden he's being fired on from the rear, they don't tolerate that very well. And so he started evacuating the whole area, and then he made one more stand there at Shies Hill. And then from that point on, it was a chase. When he made it back to Tupelo, Mississippi, he had 15,000 troops left of the 41,000. Thomas had captured 13,000 troops. And I would imagine, if you read a lot of the history books on the regiments, the Confederates were barefooted. They did not have winter clothing. Most of them did not have a blanket. And you can imagine how demoralizing that was. And the weather was below zero. You know, it was freezing rain 3 days before the actual battle. And, you know, by the time that Thomas attacked and, you know, Hood folded up, you know, many of those guys say, to heck with this, threw their gun on the ground and went home. So, you know, that 13,000 was willing people to give up. They were just ready to quit.
Now, did a lot of them go to North Carolina to join forces there?
5,000 only. Yeah.
So what do the other ones do? I was kind of curious. The other ones stayed behind.
They stayed there at Tupelo, and they was thinking about spreading Richard Taylor, the son of Zachary Taylor. He was in charge of the troops down there, but they didn't effectively do anything with them. They tried to defend against Wilson's attack on Selma and Montgomery, and Wilson just, with his mounted infantry, he just annihilated all their war manufacturing facilities. It didn't do much killing because they just overpowered the enemy. There just wasn't enough Southern troops to stop them. So, you know, it was a tough war. You know, they said that, you know, there were 624,000 men killed in the Civil War. They've now reevaluated that, and they say it's more like 750,000. So almost 1 million men. There's more men died in the Civil War than all the other wars that America's fought.
But let's go back to 1865, guys, like around Nolensville. So was there any documents, history of battles going on around there? I know.
Yeah, what you need to do is you can buy on CDs the official records. And because they're on CDs, you got a search engine that you can use, and you could just plug in Nolensville and you'll get everything that you want.
Okay.
And most of that is done by dates.
Okay.
It's indexed. It depends on who manufactured the CDs, but it can be indexed by campaign. So the Atlanta campaign would be all. What you'd be looking for is probably the Franklin campaign, because that was the last. Franklin and Nashville were the last two major ones, but you can look at all the dispatches that were sent, both Confederate and Union. Now, a lot of the Confederates have big holes in them because a lot of the documentation was destroyed. And but you'll have all of the Union stuff.
President gets me kind of mad because they think after Hood left Nashville, went back down to cross into Alabama, the war is officially over in Tennessee, but from what reports have, there's still battles going on into the spring, winter and spring.
I wouldn't call them battles. I call them more like skirmishes. Yeah. Because, you know, I don't know what the true definition of a battle is, but these were, like I said, were irregulars. They were cavalry. They was just trying to harass wherever they could. There weren't big enough numbers of them to really make that much difference, and they was hoping that, you know, if they could delay the transportation communication of the Union's foodstuffs and ammunition and all that, that would have some effect. But it was too late. It was just entirely too late.
And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for y'all coming out and supporting us this way. We welcome you to the 150th anniversary of Johnsonville, and the Battle of Johnsonville thereof. What we have on display for you today, and my name is Justin Rexroad. I'm a park ranger at Bicentennial Mall State Park in Nashville, Tennessee. I did have the pleasure of working here for a few months while I was in a seasonal position here. So we have done some extensive studies and have worked on this park and made it the way it is now. It's really come a long ways from 5 years ago even. You know, it's really come a long ways. But what we're here portraying for you today in this encampment, this is the encampment of the 43rd Wisconsin. So the troops you see today, we are portraying troops from the Wisconsin Regiment. There would have been about 700 of us here. There actually would have been more United States colored troops here than there was white troops here. So there was about 2,500 and 3,000 USCT that were here. And I'll talk a little bit more about them in a few minutes. But the 43rd Wisconsin formed up out of Milwaukee and the Madison area as well. And they marched down here early in 1864 and were on guard here from about September on until the depot was blown up by Nathan Bedford Forrest on November 4th. And then later we were actually moved out to Nashville and the battles of Nashville and Franklin to act as a kind of reserve troops. So before we went into battle. We had not, so we were, like I said, fresh troops coming from Wisconsin. So each daily, which we'll go through here in just a few minutes, is we would have went through drill, the manual of arms, marched, and did some musket firings just to make sure we were on our A game. You know, make sure we were ready for old Johnny Red to come and attack us. Also, we were in charge of protecting this depot. And to give you a little history about the depot here, in earlier 1864, they finished the railroad out here from Nashville to Johnsonville here, and the purpose of it was the Union Army to have another port access, another supply road to get supplies to Nashville. And of course, Nashville's a big railroad hub, and we send supplies through all the south through all the Union armies going through there. So Johnsonville was built and helped built by the United States colored troops who built the railroad, and then were pressed into service to act as infantry after that. They stayed here ever since. And like I said, also with the 43rd Wisconsin. Now, on November 4th, Nathan Bedford Forrest did form up across the river and surprised attacked us. and destroyed the depot. We did return fire, but it was all kind of in vain, and after the place was in ruins and on fire, we were ordered to march out of here to help protect Nashville and, like I said, Franklin against John Bell Hood and the Army of Tennessee marching up through Alabama. But Nathan Bedford Forrest did accomplish his goal. He did actually help sever the supply line here. Now, it didn't have much effect because Sherman, as you all may know, Lieutenant Tecumseh Sherman was kind of raiding his way through Georgia and was taking supplies as he seen fit. And honestly, he didn't really need supplies anymore from Johnsonville. So, but it was a pivotal area for the time being, and was the largest depot on the Western theater of the Civil War here. So, but without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the lieutenant here. He's going to go through some of the manual of arms, and I'm going to kind of guide you through there as well and explain some of the things you're seeing. Also behind you, we do have our infantry camp here, which after we get done with the musketry drill, you're more welcome to look through and ask us any questions you may have here. But I'm going to hand it over to the lieutenant.
Hi, welcome to Johnsonville State Park. As he said, we're representing the 43rd Wisconsin. We're going to run through some quick manual of arms drills, and then we're going to go out and do a few firing demonstrations. Attention, company. Take arm. Shoulder, arm. Right shoulder shift, arm. Shoulder, arm. Support, arm. Carry, arm. Present, arm.
There's a reason why the officers would train their troops and drill them constantly throughout the day. They wanted to make a whole unit to work as a well-oiled machine, wanted them all work together. If you're just one man out there fighting alone, you're not going to accomplish much. So that's why you want everybody to work together firing. Now, the rifles they have are rifle barrels, so they are very accurate for the most part. You would see a lot of 1861 model rifles and 63 model Springfield rifles, which took a 58 caliber round. But this was a huge advancement during the Civil War, having a rifle barrel in mass production instead of a smooth bore, which was in the wars previous to then, and they were very inaccurate. At about 70 yards, you might hit the broadside of a barn. But with these rifles here, 200 yards, you can get a square about the size of my chest. So very, very huge advancement there. And as you're walking around here, they're going to, like I said, go through the firing process for you and show just how different ways of how you can fire. But like I said, you would have seen these troops drilling all throughout the day. And if you can picture this area through here, at the time of 1864, there would have been no trees. This whole area would have been kind of barren. There would have been a quagmire through here, a muck and mire. You would have seen cabins everywhere and tents everywhere. And also, of course, with the depot, that was all on through here as well. It would have spanned all the way back here to these two hills and all the way up to the waterfront. If you get that chance to go down to the artillery batteries, you'll notice that the river's really wide now. At the time of the battle, it was almost a third of the size it is now. Of course, that's due to the TVA later on in the 1940s flooding this area. But the guys now are loading their muskets, and they would have gone through a process called loading in 9 times, which they would have been drilled on. Now these gentlemen behind me have all learned the drill very effectively, so they're just loading as quickly as they can now. They try to do it at least 3 shots a minute. That was the standard of the time, and that's you really wanted to make sure your whole company could fire at once like that. But you'll see the whole company firing at one time. You'll see them fired by files, and then firing as they see fit.
Fire by company, ready. Hey, fire!
And I know a lot of y'all are thinking, why in the world are they standing shoulder to shoulder firing these muskets out in the open like this? Well, there's a good explanation of that. This is actually the most advanced form of fighting at this point in time. And what you wanted to do was having those guys all together, shoulder to shoulder, firing one time. It's putting a wall of lead down the field. It's almost like a big shotgun effect. And that's what you want. You want that intimidation. You wanted to just put as much lead down the field, decimate the other side, so you can actually push them off through a bayonet charge afterwards.
Fire range. Front range. Ready. Aim. Fire.
Are they shooting in the tree? Yeah. How do you see that one? How do you like say how do you see? How do you see it?
Also, you want to practice this as much as possible because when you're on the field of battle, it's super loud. You know, when you got artillery going off and rifles going off, you really got to know what your commands are, and you got to listen for the bugle calls, the sword movements, and for your officers' calls.
Rear range. Ready. Aim. Fire. Front range. Drive. Right for this last one, we're going to go fire by fire to the right. We're going to go straight into one round and then you finish fire. Rear rank, give commands, front rank. Fire by fire to the right. Wind, fire.
Now what you saw was firing by files, and that was just where you got your front rank guy and your left and back rank guy firing together. So just a 1, 2, 3, and count off like that. So it's that's just trying to keep the fire up on the line going down. So you want to try to, at one time, if you have already fired off a few volleys, hit the target on the field, you really want to keep the fire up on them. Next to them, that fire up on them, they'll probably turn around. So this is all a good tactic.
Are they knocking down the trees?
Run!
I'm knocking down the trees. You say off. That guy will go it. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do it. Wait, get up. Get up.
Company, ready. Aim. Fire. Keep cover. Arm. Quarter. Arm.
So that concludes the musket fire demonstration. What's going to happen now is they're going to walk back around here and form up in front of you again. And after that point in time, you're more welcome to come up and you can ask questions, or if you have any questions now, you feel free to ask me, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Shoulder. Arm. Right. Straight. Forward. Hard.
Just to give everybody kind of a layout of the land here, if you're interested in seeing some of the original parts of the depot here, over here there's a trail that actually starts on this side up there by the stop sign. It will actually loop around this hill here and actually take you to see one of the old railroad turnabouts that they had there, where they actually revolved and turned around the railroad cars. Also there you can see a little bit of where the old tracks was. You can see where they built it up, and you can see the original track that went all the way back to Nashville. Of course, a lot of it is now covered by water, thanks to the TVA in the 1940s. And also there was a community here that was built after the engagement here at Johnsonville. In about 1866, the USCT that came back, they actually started forming a community here. And so you have both a white and African American community that formed up around this area. And it will expand on the hills here and in the original depot lands as well. So a lot of the descendants now who live in Waverly actually can trace their roots back to the 43rd Wisconsin and to the 12th, 13th, and 100th USCT who were here fighting for that time. All right, folks, like I said, we're glad you came out today, and if you want to, we do have artillery down this road here near the river, firing back, and we've been having reports that there might be Confederates returning fire. But we also do have a civilian camp over here as well, kind of talk about the life of the civilian, of the ladies of the time, and everything like that. So you're more welcome to hang around, ask any questions you like. You guys don't go too far. I think there was a picture. Somebody wanted to have a picture of everybody done together here. So if we could just form back up. And,
thank you for coming out. There you go.
You're in the picture, Warren. Oh, wait a minute. You send that to me.
Huh?
So I don't have to go down and you just send that one to me.
Yeah, sure.
Like I said, folks, if y'all have any questions for us, just let us know, okay?
Will work, folks, is that we will fire the weapons and then talk a little bit about what we're doing, and then we will conclude with the second shot. So we will be firing twice. During the course of this demonstration, you may wish to close up your ears. Just look at this young man right here. He started already. You may wish to do that, or if you have brought small children or animals, you may wish to keep them on a leash. He got it.
I'll be your windbreaker. I'm sorry. I'm working on it. It's still winter.
All right, we got a special delivery coming in, and then we'll get started. And welcome to Johnsonville State Historic Park, along with our compatriots at Nathan Bedford Forrest State Park, right across the river. We are commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Johnsonville. Today, when you visit Johnsonville State Historic Park, you see a rather peaceful, pastoral setting, with park-like surroundings. You hear the warm wind rustling the leaves here as it blows off the lake, keeping you nice and cool. We certainly don't want you to overheat. We'll see birds flying. We've seen eagles fly over here today. What a beautiful park setting. However, if you had been standing at this very location 150 years ago, November of 1864, you would have seen an entirely different plain. Instead of nice trees and parks, you would have been in the middle of a bustling federal depot, a supply dump for the Union Army. For as the Union Army fought and moved further south, it had to have a constant source of supplies. Every bit of ammunition, clothing, food, medicine, everything necessary for the Union Army had to be brought from the northern states. The rivers of the South provided a highway for that transportation. Steamships loaded with tons and tons and tons of material would come down the Mississippi, down the Ohio, into the Tennessee River and unload right here at Johnsonville Depot. And you look across there 150 years ago, first of all, you wouldn't see Kentucky Lake like is out there today. That lake was built by TVA in 1944. But you would have seen a free-flowing river. That river, a highway for these steamships as they came south, loaded with supplies, unloading on the wharves and into the warehouse, turning around, going back to get more. You would have seen Union gunboats armed to take that riverway. Those wharves and warehouses stacked up with tons upon tons of material. You would have seen trains coming here constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, coming from Nashville, empty, loading up right here and headed to Nashville, then to be sent to other points further south. Right here where you're standing would have been an incredible scene of activity and noise. A city always on the move as this material came through, offloaded, put on trains, moved out. Constant activity around here. However, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on November 4th, 1864, this activity came to a rather abrupt halt. That halt was arranged by Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who had placed 10 artillery pieces on the west bank of the Tennessee River. Now, as we look across there, it looks really expansive. That's because Kentucky Lake is there now. But the Tennessee River is relatively narrow compared to what you see. So those guns were put in a situation that were virtually point blank. And that afternoon, General Forrest walked up to one of those artillery pieces, pulled the lanyard, and began what would be a 4-hour bombardment of the Johnsonville Depot. The ships erupted into flames. They sunk. There was explosions. The warehouse burned. The wharves burned. This would have been a scene of utter chaos on the afternoon of November 4th, 1864. Women of the town scurrying up the hill to try to gain the safety of the fortifications on the high ground. Flames enveloping all of the buildings. And the Union Army returning fire as well. Their 12 artillery pieces brought to bear against the Confederate batteries. And this counter-battery fire lasted throughout the afternoon. Until late in the evening, the Confederate forces withdrew. And as they left, they could see the sky lit by the flames of Johnsonville Depot as it burned. That battle that afternoon was entirely an artillery exchange. To help you learn more about the artillery itself and how it was employed, I would like to ask my compatriot, Mr. Chris Miko, who's a park ranger at Shiloh National Military Park, to step up and tell you a little bit about the ordnance. Ranger Miko.
thank you all again, folks, for coming out to Johnsonville for their sesquicentennial anniversary. And what I want to talk about are the guns that you're looking at today, representing 3 different types of weapons used during the American Civil War and at the Battle of Johnsonville. If you look at the weapon closest to us, the black gun that is cast iron, that is a 10-pound Parrott rifle, developed and patented by Robert Parker Parrott, an officer with the United States Ordnance Department. This gun became, during the American Civil War, the most produced cannon during the war. The reason being, they were cheap, easy to make, and very, very accurate weapons. These are not firing cannonballs in the traditional sense anymore. These are rifled weapons firing conical or pointed projectiles. These projectiles can fly farther and faster and are much more accurate than the old cannonballs from the days before. This 10-pound Parrott rifle had a maximum effective range, meaning it could hit a target at about 1,850 yards with a good crew. The problem with this cast iron weapon is iron is very, very hard, but it's brittle. These guns could develop cracks or fissures in the metal and burst with all that pressure of the black powder going off inside the barrel. And if that gun bursts, those cannoneers have a very bad day. That is why you see an extra band of iron wrapped around the end or the breech of the weapon, giving it more strength, because that's where the black powder is going to blow up to shoot that projectile out. So they put extra metal around the breech of the weapon to hopefully circumvent any explosion of the gun in the rear. However, near the muzzle of the weapon, where the projectile comes out, that is the thinnest part of the gun, and on these Parrott rifles, that is usually what will burst. That's one of the reasons why when you see these these cannoneers, right before they fire the weapon and yell the command ready, the cannoneers towards the front of the gun lean back. It's safety. All right, they're protecting those 2 guys working the front of the piece. Now, the second gun, down line there, the pretty bright, shiny gun, that is a 6-pounder field piece. This gun is obsolete by the Civil War, but it's used all throughout the Civil War. Why? Because they needed them. There weren't enough guns to go around, and they really needed enough weapons to go around for every artillery crew. This 6-pounder field piece was actually developed in 1841. We are now 1864. It has been outclassed by things like the 10-pounder Parrott, but it's still pressed into service because it is needed. The Parrott rifle had a range of
10 pounds.
yards. Our poor little 6-pounder still
This is a shell. It would have been filled with powder with a fuse on the front. The length of the fuse would determine how far down range it would explode. Not this one, that's one. It's just,
not cast iron. Bronze is nothing but a combination of copper and tin. It is pliable. You cannot see it because it'll be microscopic. But when this gun goes off, when that explosion occurs inside the weapon, the gun expands and contracts. The gun elongates and contracts. It is pliable. It is not solid like the cast iron. So the chances of a bronze gun bursting is much less than a 10-pound Parrott rifle. The third gun from us is another iron weapon, and it is called a 3-inch ordnance rifle. They also become very, very popular during the American Civil War because they are so darn accurate. Those weapons have a maximum effective range of about 2,000 yards with a good crew. And they fire those pointed projectiles, which are very accurate. But let's say you're being attacked by infantry. How many of these guys are carrying a weapon? Oh wait, they have one big weapon, right? Right. That weapon of that battery, of that crew, is their gun. They're not going to be mucking around with a bunch of sabers and rifles and pistols and anything else. That gun is their weapon. To combat infantry, they have this. It's called canister. It is a tin can packed full of iron or lead balls. Anybody here ever hunted with a shotgun? Well, you will. Or you'll fire a cannon, which is even better. This canister will turn your cannon into a giant shotgun, cutting swaths into that oncoming infantry. I mean, for these 3-inch ordnance rifles, there are 70 iron or lead balls inside this tin, which will spray out, traveling 300 yards downrange and destroying anything in its path. This is how you protect yourself against advancing infantry. Now, before we fire these weapons, a well-trained crew during the American Civil War can load, aim, and fire an aimed round 3 times a minute with one of these weapons. Would you ever see that? Maybe. But if you saw this weapon firing 3 times a minute, something has gone terribly wrong. All right? And you are in a desperate situation. Why do I say this? This is your limit. This is your ammunition chest for your piece. You have a finite amount of ammunition you can fit in here. For a 6-pounder, you can only put 50 rounds of ammunition in that limber chest. If you fire those 50 rounds, you're out of luck for a little bit, so you bring up some more ammo. So if you saw them firing 3 rounds a minute, like I said, something's gone wrong, and you're not going to be there very much longer. You're probably going to have to pull out. All right? Okay, I guess that's about it for this. Let's go on to firing these weapons. Captain, the battery is yours.
Thank you.
Battery, low!
First engine, load with solid shot. Go! Yes.
Watch them load.
Ready.
Thank you.
Battery, from the right. Fire on fire. Fire. Gunners, take charge of the fleet.
Gonna do my hair. Yeah. I don't have much left after all the
They're gonna do it again. How was that concert? Is that it? Yeah. Are they doing it again?
That's it. Yes, and Alice Cooper was
The battery, you'll be welcome to come back around the fence and take pictures and ask questions. If you'll notice, each man does his own job. Rifleman, closest rifle on his own, does all the steps. Except for the fact that the small weapon, so he's able to do it by himself. So we have to do it with a crew. If you have any questions or anything like that, we get through securing the pieces and securing the implements, you're welcome to come around here.
Unless they're shooting at you.
If this thing happens to go off at the wrong time, you're never in this line. You're either outside the gun or you're here to break a hip. Here you're going to lose your feet. You won't be a soldier anymore. You're here to shoot. So, number 4-man. will wait for me to pick the charge. In the day, it would have been a linen sack. Today, we use aluminum foil cans for charge. And we'll pick it to make sure there's a place for that flame to go down. He picks, and as soon as he drops, I'll hold his lanyard on here to make sure, and I never over here that ever went off. Go right through. It's about, it says 22 is what it shoots off. It'd be a flame about 2 feet long if you saw it at night today. And I'll wait till I'm looking at him in the face. He's looking at his lanyard. The reason is there's so many things for that lanyard to hook on. If it blows and catches, and if he pulls it wrong, it's gone, and I break my hip. Everybody else is in danger too. So I'm waiting for him to wave me off. It's a visual sign because after the first volley, all you hear is and Lord knows if you're not in the right place, you can do it today. Even as soon as he nods me off, I take my one step out, and my job is to free this one to leave that lane. I want to make sure that primer. He turns around and tells his gunner, this number 3 gun, is ready to fire. It gives him a visual sign. That gunner knows what to do. And I'm making sure this hasn't pulled up at all or everything's set. And I'm waiting for it to go off too. I want to make sure it goes off. I won't know what's happening up front on this type of fire. If it goes off on a live fire, that gun's back there. And all 4 of us run back and roll it back up into battery. And this friction primer was quite an innovation. They put a little beeswax in the bottom too. They dip it so no moisture gets in there.
Because I was curious, you know, I saw the string, the lanyard, and I thought, what's causing it to actually go off?
This wire just yanked right out of it, 25 pounds pressure, and strike the matches. Fire that flame right into the cartridge. And it goes off. About 2,000 PSI is as much as we can get out of this gun, even if we put 2 pounds in it. It might rock the gun a little bit, but you get about 2,000. And you load it up, plug it, I say, with a projectile, it jumps to 40,000 PSI. That's why the thing rolls. And it's got to go back. Don't try to retard the recoil. You got to let it absorb that, and then you roll it back. It's going to roll. Actually, they do say, and we've done now, we've taken the stills, the gun actually lifts off. You get much off the ground and the wheels start to spin, and when it hits the ground, it's rolling. But I've live fired, you know, on 4, and in this game, as soon as you pull it, you can start get your next primer out and get it ready for the order to come to the ready. Step in. Well, when you do it for live, you go, ready to fire? Yeah. Go. You push the pull, you can't turn around fast. That gun's back there. I mean, that 2,000 pounds of material is gone. You're like, what happened to the gun? You know, it's quite a thrill. Different cat when you do that. Spiking the gun is first. Number 3 takes his pin, shoves it down the vent, and snaps it off. And I won't take the gun out forever. They can extract it. Their artificer is going to have to try to get that out of it. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. Now, they hated to do it. They had all sorts of ideas to get rid of, to take this piece off the field. They had behind my limber, and that holds this gun is another limber holding a caisson, and that caisson has another hook called a carriage hook at the very back of it. Our limber is gone. We can put this lunette onto that, and it'll be a 3-way train, but we can save the piece. If they have a lot of time and they think that they're going to turn it around and shoot it at us, pop these keys in the pull the head squares up on a chin bolt, take the tank and dump the tube out, and then smash off just one of the trunnions. The gun will never shoot again. But they hated to do it. And it took a little while. You had to take a sledgehammer, pound one of those, break one of those trunnions. That gun would never be used. Well, it was, as I understood, it was their piece, and they treasured it, and they rubbed on it and kept it clean, kept it greased. The artificer of the group would make sure everything was up in order, whether it greased on a daily basis. Things run 20, 25 miles a day. It's pretty hard. In the early wars, a 16-horse team, a 6-horse, excuse me, and by the end of the war, with lighter guns, this is much lighter guns. This is the most popular. The Paris solved the problem of the rifle. but this one was so much lighter, easier on the men, easier on the horses, easier on the carriage, that it became the most treasured gun. The rim base at 72 inches is a little shorter than the 70 carriage, but it still had accuracy. Nothing. For 6-pounders, I've seen them shoot 600 yards all day long, and you can see the ball, for one thing, going down range, and can't hit a broadside of a barn at 600 yards. That rifle, one of these guys, will drill a hole at 600 yards. At a mile, you can hit a guy with a newspaper. You can see him at a mile, a good gunner, and he just sits here. He's got his pendulum hoss on there and everything, his windage strap. He'll call back to his gunner, and he's like, I'm at a mile out. He opens up the limber box and it tells us at that yardage what's the degree. And he can bring that degree right to what he wants. And then he tells this guy, number 3, runs over here. And he tells him, I want to go this way. He'll pull the gun back. Or I'll go back this way. Maybe you got to look at it. Everything's visual. Get off that. He can jump off and he gets back into the position. Because it's set ready to go. Our fires nowadays, because just this much of a little pull of the lanyard, 25 pounds, would take them off the target at a mile downrange. So they go back to that. For the Civil War, this thing blew everything. That first parody that came out, and they were hitting, you know, Confederate location. They're saying, boy, they're getting a lot of good shots in, but it's got to be luck. They already hit the parody. They steal one immediately, and they say, hey, we captured it, brought it right to Tredegar Ironworks. Tredegar Ironworks said, oh yeah, we understand what we're doing. All we got to do is shrink down a big old base, like a masonry. That'll save that, we'll get that rifling in an iron rod. They modified it some, they made it heavier. Ours was 910 pounds. This thing's only 820, much easier. But at 910, they made it over 1,000 pounds. But they chamfered the front of the ring, because one of the problems was, in this carriage that it was made for, it hits the trunnions. So you can't get elevation. Shoot within 5 miles. They'll shoot, drive some. 5 miles. Couldn't see it. So they put that chamfer in there, so they were able to, the Confederates' gun was able to get a better angle. Yeah, a little more elevation out of it.
Well, this is 1864, so right now he's about 3. But there is an eagle at Reelfoot Lake State Park that could be this one. And he's around 30 years old.
Mama,
Okay, I'm not. Don't tell anyone I told you this.
Mama, Mommy.
He's getting on to me. He's an actor.
We're not trying to perpetuate that. We just want the history and the heritage of it to persevere and not be wiped out. They say the winner of the war writes the history. And that's true.
I'll do better next year. I should have done a better job of
Yeah, we live in Mount Juliet.
That's what I grew up in.
Oh, did you?
We still won't have too far to drive for that.
Yeah, this was much better viewing. There's no mini balls. You know why they're called mini balls?
That's something.
And this would have been your version of your portable machine. It would have started life as a treadle. And you would just buy the board in a box from the company and then remove it from your treadle, attach it to your base, and now you had a portable machine. And I love the way they advertised it. Next time you're ready to go to the seaside for your vacation, Mama can now put her machine in a box and take it along with her. Go great! This is our second year here, so.
Next year, we'll be back, same weekend, Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
We'll be back. As of right now.
That's what I've heard. We've done a lot of research on it. Sign back up. The gentleman's taking our. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Right there.
Yeah, definitely. Pardon us. We're not intending to be. We are from the Nathan Bedford Forrest Boyhood Home, located over in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, and the home is owned by the Sons of Confederate Veterans. One of the things that it is very important for is that it's the last structure, the last building that's left in America that the general lived in, and we're working to fully restore it so that we can have a historic site there where that not only the history, military and family of General Forrest can be properly and correctly interpreted, but also could be utilized for historical interpretation for the war between the states in Tennessee and literally the entire South. Because the Sons of Confederate Veterans is an educational and preservation organization. We stand to try to preserve the deeds and the history of the Southern Confederate soldier and the Southern Confederate individuals. So that was why it would be very important. We have had items here for sale that we use as fundraisers, because most of the revenue that is raised for the preservation and restoration work at the Chapel Hill home comes from private sources and revenue like we have had here with the t-shirts, bumper stickers, and other things that we are involved with. The Sons of Confederate Veterans has a small budget for us, but restoration and preservation work on historic sites is extremely expensive. The Chapel Hill home will be unique among the historic sites in Tennessee, because most of, in fact all but a couple that I'm aware of in Tennessee are antebellum homes. Another is a tavern. The historic site home there with General Forrest, his boyhood home, will be a farming ranch house. It will be a working farm. It will be the average individual there that came in, cleared property with his mules, worked it. The general, that was where he learned his trade as a blacksmith from his father William and his namesake grandfather of Nathan. He was referred to and called Bedford by his middle name, and that was the name of the county in which he was born. So that particular area is something that the sons of Confederate veterans endeavor to persevere and endeavor to preserve so that it will be there for future generations. Gene's probably done more than I have. Way here.
Nathan Bedford Forrest began in the area of Paris Landing and set up 2 sections of artillery where he fired on passing ships that were coming from the north, from ports such as Paducah and places in Ohio. And what they were doing is bringing supplies to the depot at Johnsonville. That depot was supplying General Sherman in his march to the sea. Sherman at the time had just burned Atlanta, Georgia. So Forrest was bent on destroying his supply depot, cutting off his chain of supplies, as well as trying to draw Sherman back northward in order to stop his progress through the South. We're going to do a demonstration for you now with guns much like Forrest would have had at the time, and I'll turn it back over to Captain Warren. Thank you.
We're going to do 3 rounds this time instead of just 2. Come ready.
Gun ready, sir.
By battery. On my command. Fire!
While they're loading, I'll walk you through a little bit of the process of what they're doing. Typically, a cannon crew would have 4 people on the gun. And you would have 2 officers, 1 gun and a powder monkey. Powder monkey is responsible for running powder from the limber, which is this carriage here, the chest on it, to the cannon itself. Now this is very important because that's how it is all of this ammunition. The front right position, that would have the ramrod, the sponge rod. Basically has a sponge on one end and a rod on the other end. The sponge would be used to clean the fish. The rod would be used to sheath around your can so that it gets properly pricked, which is what the rear position just behind it would do. And that would allow a primer to be inserted. The back left position would insert the primer, pull the cord, firing the round. After the round has been fired, the front left position would then clean the cannon with what's known as a worm rod, and that would remove any debris from the cannon itself in order to clean the barrel and prepare for the next round. Will there be a write-up in the cannon paper this week? There was one in the last
Yep.
Thank you.
Gun ready, sir?
Okay. Gun number 3. On my command, fire. Gun number 4. On my command, fire.
It's clear. It's clear.
Here's that echo.
Oh, wow.
That echo. Run across the field. Sound like thunder.
On your way out, everyone on the cannon crew, the members of the camp down here, all the park staff and our French group at the tent. The French group will have souvenirs for sale on the way out, so be sure to talk to them.
It's on your ear.
Thank you all for coming out today. The next event we will have on the park will be this coming weekend. We will have what's called the NSSA, National North-South Skirmish Association Party Competition. They will be firing live rounds from Civil War period rifles and muskets at the ball field at Happy Hollow. So I invite you all to come out to that. If you're interested in this sort of demonstration, you'll be interested in that as well. It's something really to see. It gives you an idea of the accuracy of the weapons that we Our following next event after that will be November 28th, and that event will be the lighting of the knob and pilot knob. It's something really to see. It's lit up with Christmas lights, and we will also have singing. Santa Claus will be there, and lots of good food for you as well. So be sure to come out for that. Number 3 ready, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Gun number 4. On my command, fire. Gun number 3. On my command, fire.
Clear. Yeah. Good job.
Clean and secure.
There didn't much happen out there that time.
Do another one?
We're done.
We're done.
We're done.
Before it starts. Basically, it's a tube filled with powder. This wire, which I've got some of them on my hat here, just been around. When they pull this out of there, you can see how much of it's actually down inside the tube.
2 weeks from now.
When they pull it out, it creates a spark, igniting this powder. But with this being clamped shut, this end's just filled with wax or something. It blows it out and blows it down into the powder bag inside the chamber, igniting the powder.
He said they have about.
So that's
what
that and one of these is what you're holding in your hand. This is after they're used. So
Yeah, that you gave me one of these.
yeah, that's right. Pretty good. Mine was more used against troops. Just a little more.
Safety dump in water now? Safety dump in water now?
Shotgun primers, and some of them even use 22 blanks, so those slap hammers. Slap hammer, all it does is mounts over the vent tube, and when you pull the lanyard, it just slaps a hammer down like that, and that's what actually ignites it. Yeah, it works just like a pistol. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly.
No, I didn't wash after Medina. I washed before Medina.
Hello, car wash. It works really good. So just running it through it. Just run it through there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's using
Like you wash your car and just get rid of it.
They're filling theirs up to the rim.
Well, there's been times that we do popcorn prayer, and if the round gets wedged in there or it's gone the wrong way, like somebody put flour in and put powder in by mistake, and we'll have to take our bucket and flood it and see if that water will come all the way back to that completely out.
You got drops in the
My name is Marty Warren Jr. and I'm with 1st Tennessee Heavy Artillery Company K. I live in Carroll County, but my unit is from all over West Tennessee and North Mississippi. We travel all over. We've been to Selma, Alabama in the south, up to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania for the 150th last year. Our unit has 6 guns and 5 mortars, and we're just a group of guys and gals that love to teach history about the Civil War.